I'm Nick Snow, watching Government for Oil and Gas Journal in Washington, D.C. Bills to expand federal offshore oil and gas leasing and revenue sharing with coastal states may have generated more questions. But U.S. Bureau of Ocean Energy Management Director Abigail Ross Hopper also discussed a measure dealing with petroleum condensate at the U.S. Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee's May 19th hearing on energy supplies. S1224 aimed to standardize the federal government's definition of and policies related to condensate, quote, which is a very light form of petroleum, end quote, according to the committee's majority staff memorandum on the bill. Many federal agencies have different definitions of what qualifies as condensate and how it differs from crude oil, it noted. In common parlance, one man's heavy condensate is another man's light crude. The majority staff memo did not mention that these varying definitions didn't matter much until the U.S. Department of Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security's June 24, 2014 ruling that upgraded condensate could be exported as a petroleum product. S1224 would affirm that decision. It also would direct the U.S. Department of Energy to create a standard definition for condensate and authorize DOE and the U.S. Department of the Interior to assess it separately from crude oil. Hopper explained what this could involve in her written testimony. BOEM currently defines condensate as a very high-gravity liquid, one greater than 50 degrees API. It reports crude and condensate jointly as oil in its assessment of undiscovered, technically recoverable oil and gas resources on the U.S. Outer Continental Shelf. Resource assessments, which BOEM geoscientists and engineers conduct in frontier areas, lack the empirical data to define the condensate yield separately, Hopper said. Assessors rely on overall oil and gas volumes associated with analog fields from publicly available industry sources and third-party data services, which also don't report condensate separately, she indicated. BOEM is willing to work with other federal agencies to develop a working definition of condensate to help clarify U.S. energy policy, but opposes adopting a separate reporting convention for condensate in its undiscovered OCS oil and gas resource estimates, Hopper said. The bill would increase uncertainty in U.S. Geological Survey undiscovered petroleum resource assessments, especially estimates of natural gas liquids, she continued. Industry, state, and national databases, upon which USGS relies to estimate natural gas liquids, do not include condensate as a separate item. If it was required to report condensates as part of its undiscovered resource assessments, USGS would have to use very uncertain condensate estimates alongside more reliable NGL figures, which already exist, Hopper said. If a new condensate definition was developed, USGS says inclusion of new figures into assessments would take years, she added. That's Watching Government for this week. In Washington, I'm Nick Snow for Oil and Gas Journal.